Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or flow with the woo-woo waters, our intention is to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. When this episode comes out, it will be the first week of October, which is just wild. We will be in October, in sweater season, in fall. Heather, I see today you're already wearing your sweater. Are you all ready for fall?
It's kind of chilly here today in New Jersey, even though it's only September. So I'm also ready to leap into sweater weather as soon as you say so. So I'm here for it.
Well, I'll be holding on to the warmth for as long as I can. But actually, the day that this episode airs, I will be on my way back to New Jersey after my 6-week stay in Boulder, Colorado.
It's always so wild when we are recording these today, but then it's gonna drop in a couple weeks, and it's wild to think about where we'll be. And it's always cool when I'm listening to the episode to hear where we were when we were recording it. So I can't believe at the point that we're listening to this episode, it'll be, your 6 weeks in Colorado will have come and passed. It's insane.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be exciting to see where both of us are. I fully agree with you there. But to reel it back into the present moment right now, today's episode, you're going to be kicking us off with something, with a topic, a little share that's been really prevalent for you in this past week. And I thank you in advance for sharing this story, because I know it has been a little bit of a sensitive topic for you. And so why don't you just take us from here? How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm, like I said, happy that it's a chilly fall day here in New Jersey, but generally over the last week, I've really noticed, probably actually 2 weeks now, I've really noticed myself deep in comparing myself to others on social media, personally, professionally. I'm just feeling this constant sense of it's almost like this dark cloud has been over me for the last 2 weeks, and it's you're not doing enough, or other people are doing cool, better, awesome things, do more, do better. And it's really been challenging, and we'll get into tools on how to navigate that, but I just feel like it's a very relatable topic. I mean, people talk to me in therapy all the time. I just wrote a blog post this week about social comparison and all things comparing ourselves to others in the comparison trap. So that's really where I'm at. That's truly how I'm doing. And I thought, this is where I am. So let's make an episode out of it.
Absolutely. Definitely a relatable topic. I mean, we are all prone to comparison, to self-judgment, to insecurities. And, again, so first and foremost, I really thank you for bringing this conversation and bringing this personal share into this space. And that's what we have this space here for. That's what we are using our voice for in this podcast, is to, showcase the really more challenging parts of being human, paired with all of the glimmers and the beautiful parts and the healing and whatnot. So I'm really just honoring you, and I'm looking forward to expanding on this conversation with you.
I'm actually curious if maybe you would share first. I can understand and explain from my clinical world, the function, the evolutionary function of social comparison. But I'm actually genuinely curious to learn what you have to say, and what, social comparison is, means, how you explain it in your world.
I think actually my first initial thoughts really tie in more with your understanding of it as well. I mean, just from a personal perspective here, it makes sense that we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, especially with the prevalence, presence of social media. And we've talked about this in so many episodes. In the guest episode that we had with registered dietitian Alyssa, I mean, we talked about then how much social media and how much that comparison really impacts our mental health or our body image issues. And we have talked in other episodes about how it's easy for us to feel like we are not where we're supposed to be or not where we're meant to be, or that we're just behind in life. And so I think that's really what I see as being the root. You know, back in the day when there was no social media, your source of comparison was probably like your neighbors. And even then, I'm sure people looked at their neighbor's lawn or their neighbor's possessions and were like, well, they have that. Why don't I have that? So I think it's always been there. It's probably a natural part of, being human and having this inner desire to achieve, to have, etc. And it just has gotten worse with all of the stimuli around us.
You're spot on. You're exactly right. From an evolutionary perspective, comparison is something that we do. It's like the barometer so that we know if we're like on the right path or doing the right thing or where we should, I'm using air quotes, should be. Yeah, we would look to the people around us and say, "Oh, look, they have a great lawn," or "Oh, look at their house. It's beautiful," or it looks safe. I want that. And then it kind of like gives us this energy to do something about that, right? So we are looking around to others. We're also, as human beings, innately social creatures. We quite literally like need social interaction to survive. From like the minute that we're born, we're depending on like the community that's around us, our moms, our parents, and then our caregivers are relying on their community for support. So we're
Mm,
always looking for um approval from the communities and socially. So that's another piece of this comparison, is that not only are we comparing ourselves because other people have what we want, but we're also comparing ourselves to make sure that we fit in and that we're like doing the right thing within our communities.
yeah, absolutely. And that comes back to this inherent desire for belonging in society, like wanting to feel like you belong and or more so like fit in. And by having the things that the other people have around you or by doing the things that equals, in our conscious minds, that equals like fitting in.
Exactly. Then you add on the fact that it's 2023 and we have social media and we have cell phones literally attached to our hips, and that only like amplifies all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, moment of compassion and love for the Heather the other day, who was in that very insecure moment, who was comparing herself. I mean, it's hard. And when you texted me sharing this experience that you were having, it's easy for somebody on the outside to be like, what do you mean? Why are you comparing yourself to somebody else? Like, you're doing so great. From an outsider perspective, it's easy to look at anybody and to just say, I don't get why you would even feel a slightest bit insecure or compare because you have XYZ, right? Like, from the outside perspective, we can see all the things that people have. From the internal perspective, I think we see all the things that we don't have,
Yeah.
So there's kind of a disconnect there. And it's easier to be on the external, to be on the outside looking at somebody as opposed to the inside looking, like, the person looking inwards.
Yeah. It's really it's like inner child work, it's shadow work, it's like all of these uncomfortable, icky, heavy, low energy feelings that are really like stirred up. And that's kind of where I've been at in going through this. When I texted you the other day, your response to me, I just pulled it up because I didn't want to butcher it in any way. Your response to me was so compassionate. You said, I hope you can take care of little Heather and remind her that she's doing great. She is always, always more than enough. I remember getting that text from you and I was like, threw my phone and I started weeping. I was like, oh my gosh, I was so emotional reading that because it's true. And I think she was in there just like feeling so vulnerable. I think that's a big piece of this is like feeling so vulnerable and so deeply insecure. And like you're saying, it's one thing for people on the outside to look and be like, but why are you feeling this way? But it was so deep seated and it was really so hard to sit in all of that.
Yeah, a big hug for little Heather. And I'm so glad that in the moment that was something that was really helpful for you to hear. And you mentioned it too, that inner child piece too, because I think in those moments, I think whatever age we are, anytime we are having some kind of emotional reaction to something, it's like inner child version of us, right? Because like adult version is more put together or more, I don't know, just like emotionally matured. Yet in those moments where we don't quite feel so emotionally mature, it's likely that we're acting from a place of inner child wounding, and it affects everybody. We all are there in those moments. So in that moment when you're not quite feeling like you're doing enough or like you're not enough, that's inner child Heather coming through and just feeling it makes sense. Like we're able to pinpoint the times in our childhood where we start to understand that we need to act better, think better, feel better, because we go from being these cute little children where every single thing that we do is cute and perfect. And then we get to a certain age where all of a sudden then our performance is being judged and criticized, and we're being rewarded for the things that we're doing as opposed to just like the inherent qualities that make us us. And so when I came in there with like, you know, reminding little Heather that she is more than enough, that's what I mean by making sure that our inner child knows that our worthiness, our success isn't based on the things that we do and how we do them, but who we are. And that's enough always.
And I think that's like very deep and sometimes hard to buy into. Like, I think it's in that moment, I think I was in a vulnerable enough spot to hear and understand that. But a couple days later now, when I'm a little bit more calm, I have this other part of me that's like, yeah, but like also go do something about it. Also go do more. Like I think I have like that Mr. Fix It in me is coming out. And I do think it's really truly a balance of like knowing our worth and really doing that work and trying to sit down with our inner child and be with them and really cherish and value them and let them know that they are worthy and valued. And then the adult side of us is like, okay, and there are things that I can do about this. And there are ways that I can navigate this space. Maybe it's here to like teach me something too. It's a little bit of
For
both, I
sure.
feel.
Yeah, I think the whole, point behind reparenting yourself as an adult, reparenting that inner child is first granting them the space that they need to be like emotionally expressive, right? It's like nurturing. It's kind of like the way I see it. If a child is crying, it's not conducive for a parent, an adult to say, to yell at them and to give them an actionable step like, go do this, go do that. Like, all they want in the moment is to be held, right? Or to be given the space to be understood. And so, just because we are adults now, we sometimes still need that space, that time to be held, to sit in the feelings, to throw the fit, right? And to then like let those emotions kind of simmer. And then, yes, this is exactly the part that you're talking. Then it's like, okay, well, now I'm ready to do something.
100%. Yeah. I think that we can't, if we don't sit in that feeling, it gets stuck. I feel like I always think about our feelings as like this vault inside of like our core or our chest. And like if we try to fix it too soon or stop the feeling from happening, if we stop ourselves swallow, like you can literally feel sometimes like swallowing down your tears, then I think we put a lid on it and it gets stuck. So I cried. I sat and I cried and I felt the feeling, and then I was like, all right, now what am I going to do? I'm not going to stay here crying for these 2 weeks where I've been feeling this way. I'm also going to do things about it. So I think it's figuring out that dance or that like ebb and flow.
Yeah, it is. And I think sometimes when I listen to my own, insight here, like when I'm listening to us say this, like I can hear a voice in my head, or I don't know, even in somebody else's head that's like, well, that seems like a too much of like a soft approach. Like sometimes you just have to, rub some dirt in it, slap a band-aid on it, and move on. And like, of course, it's going to be different for each and every person in any given scenario. But if we want to look at it from like more of an adult perspective, I guess we can look at it as like nervous system regulation. In that moment where you are feeling deeply insecure or not feeling good about yourself, your nervous system is completely out of whack. Here's where you're experiencing all of like the bodily sensations, such as like shaking or tension in your body, or, whatever it is for you. And it's your responsibility in that moment then to re regulate your nervous system. And so for you, Heather, in that moment, that may have been crying and getting it out, right? Like expressing it to another friend. It goes back to our episode on the emotions and how to acknowledge, process, and release them. I think it really ties into that episode a lot, in that, like, there's two steps there. It's not just move on or just do it. It's like first regulate, then when you're feeling safe in your body, in your emotions, whatever, then you can confidently or more confidently, more strongly take action.
I'm laughing as you're talking because I'm pretty sure in my welcome packet paperwork that I explain that therapy sometimes makes you feel like things get worse before they get better. And what I mean by that is exactly what you're saying. You're going to come in and start working with me, and I'm going to almost require you to sit with your feelings and feel them. Because if you don't, if you just jump into fix it, do something about it, the feeling is going to be like, all right, but I'm going to come back later. Like, just you watch. And like, they all kind of pile up back there, and we never get resolution from that. So while things might not actually be getting worse, it feels icky for those people that want to shelf their feelings or avoid their feelings or kind of like skirt their feelings. We're actually not going to do that. We're going to pull them out and we're going to sit with them and feel them and then do the things afterwards.
Mm, yeah, such an important disclaimer, or, heads up to your
Yeah.
clients that are going to start working with you. And same thing for our audience. Like if you're not in a practice of doing this already, if you are new to this work, wherever you are at, we absolutely emphasize in so many of our episodes that this work is not always easy. In fact, it's more challenging than not. However, you have likely found yourself here, either working with Heather, working with me, or listening to this podcast, listening to any kind of self help healing podcast, because you are wanting or preparing yourself to choose that more challenging route, knowing that it gets easier after it gets harder.
It absolutely gets harder first. And I think that's also like a barrier for a lot of people is like having the bandwidth or the headspace or like being in that place to be able to do that hard work. And we've said this before, we had a whole episode on how healing is hard, and that's fair. And we see you. And like, I'm not saying we have to do all the things all at once, but it is going to be hard and it will always be worth it.
Mm, yes, always worth it. And just let that be like the North Star that keeps you going. It'll always be worth it. So, what does that look like then with your clients? I love what you shared about how you were able to tend to yourself in the moment. when your clients come to you with similar feelings of insecurity, of finding themselves comparing themselves to others, how do you work through that with them?
First, it's the feeling, right? It's sitting with the feeling, it's nervous system regulation. It's just kind of like recalibrating ourselves in that way. And then it's a bunch of different things. I have actually a few different tools for this, and for time's sake, I won't get to all of them. I did just post a blog post on my website, though, about this. So if anybody wants to read more, that is a resource that's there. But I think grounding ourselves is a big one in like reality, that social media is not real, that the things that I'm seeing, the things that people are putting out there is not actually a helpful, like you just said, North Star for me to be following, because that's all filtered and edited and snippets of what's actually going on. I mean, my own social media the last few weeks has not at all indicated that I've been in this comparison trap. So, one, it's kind of like coming up with some sort of affirmation or statement or reminder that, like, this social media isn't real, or this comparison isn't like serving me right now. So it's some sort of like grounding. Then I think it's decoding the thoughts. So like I actually sat and was like listening to what my brain was saying, and it's trying to decode, okay, like so if my brain is saying like, "Oh my gosh, look at Devon. She's doing all of these amazing things and her social media and her branding is always perfect and like that's awesome." Trying to translate the message that my brain is trying to say. So if my brain is saying all of those things, it's probably trying to say like, okay, Devon's on her game. Like that's awesome. And like I admire that. And that's something that maybe I aspire to, or I want, or I'm craving some of that in my life. And maybe I have to like work on that a little bit more, because I'm noticing that she's all the way up here and I'm feeling all the way down here. So what's kind of like more of a realistic middle ground there? I've also been setting boundaries with my social media. Next week, I'm planning on like not engaging on social media. I have a post coming out just saying like I'm going to be taking a break from it. And, I think like having some sort of limits or boundaries around that. And then the last thing is making sure, this sounds so silly because we're talking about not comparing, but making sure that you're comparing yourself to everyone, not just someone. So, like, kind of balancing things in that way, where like if I'm only looking, Devon, at your social media and how you're doing, making sure that I'm remembering that there's literally millions of other people out there, and trying to compare myself not just to a single person but to like everybody across the board, because I think that gives us a more balanced perspective.
Mm. For very helpful, tangible tools and tips and reminders. So thank you. I actually kind of want to respond to each one in these next few minutes. So the first one that you mentioned was how somebody's presence on social media doesn't give like the most accurate representation of them, right? Like it's just snippets. It's like a minute percentage of what their life actually is. And I think that's a really helpful tool too, especially when we find ourselves comparing to people who are like considered to be up there, right? The successful, the like fully booked. I mean, you are fully booked. But you know what I mean? Like the people who like seemingly have it all. I think it's helpful to look at those people as kind of like, and the things that they show, like they're showing us the final product, right? Like they haven't, you don't see all the little steps along the way. And I actually think a lot about businesses like Little Words Project, like what they came out with, and how Adriana posted a video of how she started this business 10 years ago in her parents' basement, right? Like anybody looking at their Instagram page, not seeing that post, may see this final product and be like, wow, they are so successful. They are killing it. There's no way I could ever get here. And then you see a reel or a story like, this is where I started, and here's how I got there. And those are the pages, the businesses, the people that I find myself really inspired by, because I think, hey, That's kind of like me too. I started something from nothing. You, Heather, started something from nothing, right? And so I think it's helpful to see anybody's page as being some kind of final product, and they started somewhere. And it's just making sure that you remember that what you're looking at is a final product and not at all where somebody starts at or even the journey along the way.
Yeah. No, that's exactly, I think, part of this is that like it's not helpful for me to compare myself to a company that's been in existence for 10 years when my business has been in existence for 2. I have 8 years to go, and I also want to kind of like note here, not to take it away from you. I know you have more to add, but I actually intentionally don't have gratitude on this list. Some people might find practicing gratitude for what they have and what exists to be really helpful. In this space, I find it to be more detrimental in these moments, in these emotional moments for me, because I always have this like but nonstop like nagging in my brain. If I try to say, like, yes, I'm grateful I started a business from nothing, my brain's like, but there's so much more to go. So for me, gratitude isn't accessible. So I just always kind of feel the need to let people know that, like, if that's not accessible for you in this emotional moment, that's also okay. Just focus on like where you are, what's reality, like the kind of tangible fact-based things.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of ties into our episode, 2 episodes back when we touched on this concept of toxic positivity or any of the ways in which we redefined or relabeled that word because yeah, sometimes it's not going to be attainable. And it's almost like it adds judgment, for why we're feeling the way that we are when we should be so grateful for the things that we do have. So I'm with you there. I'm really glad that you put that disclaimer in as well. So thank you. And then to your second point too of taking the things that you admire in other people and kind of seeing them as like being, a goal setting practice for yourself. I'm with you there too. I think that it's really helpful to see people who have the things or are doing the things that we find to be so cool or, things that we want, because then it gives us like a bar that we want to work towards. If we don't know what we want, where we want to go, what we want to work towards, then like, what are we doing? So it does help to have something in our like vision, like line, I don't know, vision board, line of sight, as long as it's not detrimental to your own well-being.
Yep. It's all about finding that balance of noticing and paying attention to like why these thoughts keep popping up and like using that as your goalpost,
Yeah.
but not allowing that to be like your only sole voice.
Yeah. Sometimes I actually do like to look at where somebody is, and like my mind likes to reverse engineer how they got there. Maybe that's like the Virgo, placements in me where I'm like super analytical, but I really enjoy that. Like looking at where somebody is, whether it's following their journey or listening to a story or just kind of like getting an idea of like, okay, what did this person have to do to get to where they are? I love that. Again, though, it's with the mindfulness too that like their path may look vastly different from my path. Like the ways, the things that got them to where they are might look different from mine.
One of my clients recently said to me that their partner loves math for the exact reason of what you're saying, that like we can get to the same outcome by different equations. Like multiple different equations lead you to the same outcome. And I think like that just is what popped in my head when you were saying that.
I love that. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I think math has always been one of my more favorite subjects. So maybe it just all ties in like that.
It's very possible.
And then I think the response to the first two and, what we've talked about kind of ties into your third with boundaries is like setting those boundaries so that you're using comparison in a healthy way, but not in a way where it's, as we mentioned, detrimental to your well being. And that fourth part, too, on making sure that you're comparing yourself to everyone. I like that. It does sound contradictory as we're saying, like, don't compare yourself. But actually, yeah, compare yourself to everybody, but in a way that serves you and in a way where you create boundaries for yourself around it.
The last two are all about boundaries and balance. A lot of this, I think, really hearing you reflect back what I shared, like the word that's coming to me is just balance. Like, I feel like things for me over the last 2 weeks, or when you're comparing yourself to someone, it's just kind of like a very skewed perspective. It's an imbalanced perspective. So, if we can kind of like shift things back to getting to a more neutral, balanced, peaceful place, that's, I think, where we wanna land.
And it really makes me think of, where we were in our lives when we last saw each other, right, at the Little Words Project wellness event. And we were reflecting on that event. We were reflecting on all the things that were happening in our lives. And I hope you don't mind me using, what was going on in your life at the time as an example. I kind of see from an outside perspective. Please feel free to chime in on your inside perspective. But I kind of saw you at the other end of the spectrum where you're like, I'm feeling really good about where I am right now, right? You had just landed the second corporate contract. And then now you kind of find yourself at the opposite end of the spectrum where it's like, I'm not doing enough. And so this balance that you're talking about is like, yeah, now maybe you're in a process of finding yourself more in that middle ground.
Yeah, we talked about, I don't know if it was last episode or the episode before, the pendulum swing, and I think, like, my pendulum was, like, very far to the left when we were coming off that Little Words Project event, everything was going well, and I've totally swung to the other side, and now I'm feeling like everything is awful and I'm not doing nearly enough, and I just wanna get back to that middle ground. That's all.
And yeah, and that's life sometimes. So
Mhm.
again, thank you so much for your vulnerable share and just for showcasing that like that is life. The highs are the highs, the lows are the lows. Ideally, we find ourselves somewhere in the middle, whatever that middle
Yeah,
ground looks like for
totally.
us.
So, as we're wrapping up, then, Devin, do you have any additional insight or tools or things to share from your world on this topic?
Really love everything that we've offered, that we've chatted about here. A reminder that I'm really loving these days for myself, that I love sharing with those that I work with, is that the things that we find desirable or admirable in other people, like the qualities, the things that they're doing, the achievements, I really truly believe that we have those qualities within us as well, just to some maybe similar or different degree. And sometimes that quality or that achievement looks different, right? It's going to manifest in each one of us very differently. So it's there. And that's kind of like the reassurance piece is like the thing that you see in somebody else that you really like, it's within you too. It's just showing up differently. Or maybe it's like dormant right now. And this is really an opportunity for you to figure out how to activate that quality or that level of achievement within yourself in a way that is unique to you.
You posted something recently about that, and like that has just been so in the forefront of my mind. I've been trying, I should say, to keep that in the forefront of my mind. I noticed that, like, I'm just thinking, I think about dogs a lot. Like, they're all different and all adorable and so cute. And like, Tortellini doesn't compare herself to Ellie. And like, I'm just trying to think, like, everything is different and everything looks different. And like, as uncomfortable as that is, it's also beautiful.
Mm, I like that example. You're right. And we've talked before about how much we can learn from nature, right? Because a tree doesn't compare itself to another tree and thinks that they should have more or less or more colorful or less colorful leaves than the other tree. Um, and, putting that into a real life example with people too. If there's a quality that you find really admirable in somebody, like for example, like somebody may look at you and be like, wow, I really admire how Heather just went out there and asked for what she wanted when she first started her business and, landed a corporate contract. Like I could never be that confident and that bold in asking for what I want. Well, maybe that is a quality that you have within you. Maybe it's not in the way that Heather has it, like where you're going to go and create something from nothing with a corporate contract, but maybe, likely, you have that quality somewhere else within you. And I think when we can take the eyes off of somebody else and how they did it and look to find that quality within us, it really does help.
Yeah. If nothing else too, maybe it's just something that we value. So it is in us, you know what I mean? Even if I don't know how to live it out, it is probably something that I believe in or I value, hence I admire, hence I want, hence I'm comparing.
Yeah, there we go. And, just my last piece before we wrap up is that maybe the quality that you find so inspiring, admirable in another person does exist within you, but it's just dormant. Like maybe it's just taking a little snooze or it hasn't been like paid any mind or attention lately. And so this is really an opportunity. I love seeing all things as opportunities, lessons to be learned, opportunities for us to figure out how to activate that quality or that characteristic within us.
Exactly. I think all of this comparison is an opportunity for us to create more balance, for us to do more things if that's what we're called to do, and to just be aware of where we're at and where we want to be.
100%. And thank you again, Heather, for bringing this conversation in, for bringing your personal share in. As always, I know that these personal shares, these stories, and the way that this is actually kind of like that reverse engineering. We're showing like where you are now, where you started, and then like going through the whole process of it. So really cool. And looking actually at the background behind you, I do have a like vision board share, if I may, this week.
Mm-hmm.
So right behind your head is the little poster with the snail on it that says,
Mm-hmm.
"Take your time." And I love that reminder for this episode because as I'm looking at the snail, which, as we know, moves at a very slow pace, right? The snail isn't looking at some other animal and is like, oh, I wish I was moving as fast as that being. And so I love that reminder that we are all on our own time, on our own timeline. We are all built differently. We are all also meant to do vastly different things. And so in those moments where we compare ourselves to others, the reminder that you are on your own time and that's more than okay, more than enough is my send off for today.
Love it. I think the only other thing I'll say is, like, I've posted this once before, grow your own way. And that's kind of it. So thank you, Devin,
Beautiful.
for holding space for me and letting me do some storytelling. I hope that this was helpful. For some of our listeners, as always, we're grateful for you to be listening, sharing this space with us. If you guys ever have any questions, as always, reach out, and we'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.